Good evening, afternoon, or morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about cybersecurity and IT and the soft skills needed for your career. As typical, John's with us, the little lurker who may or may not say anything. Robert, myself, Brian, and Ron may join us as well during this call. So we wanted to start off by talking about soft skills and the necessity for soft skills. And I think one of the reasons why I thought this was an appropriate thing to bring up was Rob and I were at RSA last week, and one of the main themes that they talked about on any of the career development or any of the curriculum or any of the training side of sessions that we went to, they all talked about soft skills. So that was really interesting that they all were talking about. In addition to it, at Las Positas College here, we have industry advisors that come in and look at our curriculum and give us advice saying, hey, we're trying to hire people from you, but they lack these skills in this area. And one of them that comes up year after year is soft skills. So we thought we'd talk about soft skills. And I think one of the most important reasons why we need to talk about it, if you're not sold on the fact that you need to have them, is that it's career limiting. You may not get a job. You may not get past the interview. You may, even if you have the job, get passed over for promotion. There's a number of different things that may happen in your career that is not going to enhance your career. It's only going to hinder it. And so the better you are off at these soft skills, the more mobility and the better off your career will be. And I don't know, you guys tell me if you agree with that or not.
Oh, I 100% agree. Right? It goes along with that age-old saying of dress for the job you want, not the job you have, right? Mm-hmm. So this plays right into what you were just talking about. If you could have the best resume, you could have the best tech skills that are there, but if you show up for your interview in jeans and a t-shirt in a business attire, in an environment that requires, the limited of the low end would be business casual, right? Like khakis and a polo shirt, for example.
Right.
But you show up in jeans and a t-shirt, you're not going to be looked on very favorably, right, during that interview process. They may take notes and say that, yeah, he's a really great tech, or, he really knows the tech side of stuff. But when it comes down to it, this is a person who has to maybe interface with the C-level branch of the organization or upper management, or if it's a consulting firm, this is somebody who's going to be the face of your company when you send them out to your clients, right?
Right.
That's their impression of your organization is going to be how that person presents themselves. So if they show up in jeans and a t-shirt to, do an audit or something, people are going to, they're going to look twice at the person, then they're probably not going to call you again to come back and do a follow-up or, to explain whatever. I'm just saying that's just my personal take on it from a dress perspective, but
we're in agreement,
right.
I guess.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I'd throw in with this, guys, is, especially with the people that I consult with, I'll oftentimes tell them, to most people, technology is almost voodoo or black magic.
Yeah.
And it's really not any different than if I were to go see an oncologist. I'm anticipating a degree of professionalism. If I go in to see a doctor and he shows up in flip-flops and a tank top and is using poor grammar, it doesn't present himself as a professional, my level of confidence, because I don't know what he's doing, severely dwindles or disappears. And in all honesty, when we're talking IT, it's really not that much different than going to see a doctor. You're afraid something's happened to me or something's happened to my computer or I have a problem. I need somebody to help me. So it really puts IT people in a position where they're seen as somebody who has to help someone when they're in their weakest moment.
Agreed. I agree. That's a good point, John.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that it's important for us to realize this as professionals, that people do judge us by the way we behave, by the way we talk, and by the way we dress, and by the way we carry ourselves. And that, right or wrong, whether or not we know what we know or don't, people still judge people by the way they look and by the way they act, and you just have to, it's something we all have to deal with. So this is how you hack life, I guess. So we'll tailor our conversation around some of these different things, talking about presentation skills, customer service, follow through, clothing attire, bearing, tact etiquette protocol, communication skills on email, phone, being professional when you're reporting to somebody, and then listening are all important skills that are necessary. And I think one of them that's kind of like we're going to talk about throughout all of this is you need to be able to translate tech talk into business talk. And that's going to be a very important skill to have because you can just talk right over everybody's head and then they won't know what you're talking about. You may baffle them completely and they may, wow, that guy really knows what he's talking about, but he didn't help me figure out what it means to me or what it means to the business. Because business people are all taught in school, you got to ask, why do I care, right? They want to know what's the deal, what's the bottom line. And if you can't translate where you just start talking about backups on a server or something like that, you need to translate it into this is how much downtime for the business is if we lost a server and we didn't have a backup, right? And then you can actually talk about dollars and cents. So that's kind of from there. So professionalism, the first thing, I like what Merriam-Webster said about the conduct, aims, or qualities that characterize a mark of a profession or a professional person. And this all kind of focuses in on the behavior of a person. And this is a career enhancement. The more of a professional you are, the more people see you as a professional, the more they're going to trust you and the more they're going to come to you for issues. Coming to you for issues doesn't mean hey, your mom's also going to call you, but it's also other businesses are going to say, hey, I like that guy. Let's try and hire that guy. Those types of things are where you're going to find with professionalism. Also with this, and I don't have a bullet point on here, but there's for the number of the certifications that I have, there's a code of ethics that's required to be followed. If you're in ISC Squared or ISACA, or if you join ISSA, they all have a code of conduct that you're required to follow. And if you don't follow those code of conducts, there could be a hearing, and you could actually lose your certification over it. And one of the things that they want to get past you is if you have the designation CISSP or CISA, you're certified. We don't want that certification to lose value. And so collectively, all of us that have CISSPs or CISAs, we want everybody else to stay at that same level of professionalism in order to maintain the credibility of the certification. But apart from all of that, professionalism is still going to be one of those things that you're going to have to deal with throughout your career. Anybody else have anything?
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, a lot of the professional organizations that you may end up belonging to throughout the course of your career, right? You mentioned a couple already, like CISSP and CISA, right? The governing bodies for those being ISC Squared and ISACA. But there are other ones that are out there that, again, the members of the group themselves, right? They kind of police themselves that everybody's going to act in a professional and responsible manner, right? And again, it's to ensure that the core group as a whole is viewed in that same level. So if you attain your CISSP, you should carry yourself with professional attire and mannerisms and things like that. And that's just a kind of a unwritten rule within that group. That's how everybody in that group carries themselves. And if somebody isn't doing that, that starts to look negatively on the group, right?
Right. Well, think about this. I should have put into the slide something in there. What are some examples that you've seen where people have not acted professional, and what was the impact on them? And I can think of a couple people where I've known throughout my career who never acted professionally, and like some of the behaviors that I could demonstrate. One, telling dirty jokes all the time at work, in a work environment. A lot of people think, oh, I'm buddies with all these people. You don't know if you're offending somebody or not. They may laugh but still be offended because, peer pressure, or they're in a group and they don't want to seem contrarian or anything like that. But in those types of situations, that could be career limiting as well, people start talking behind people's backs and stuff like that. And by the way, gossip is probably a good example of not being a professional. If somebody calls you and says, hey, what do you think about this person? I would keep it at their work product and not about what you think about them personally. But definitely thinking about those types of things, like, and we'll talk about some of the other stuff. Obviously, when you communicate with people, communicate in a professional manner. And there's a couple tricks about being professional. Here's one that I always get, and that is you talk to people all the time, and people are in one camp or another, and they almost with religious zeal will go to bat for a particular brand or company that they are really into. And I'm not going to say any names, but let's just say there's a company out there that has a certain type of hardware that you might want. Some people come out there and say, this is the answer, this is the only answer. And unfortunately, that's not the professional answer. And in fact, if somebody tells me that without even hearing what my requirements are, they don't even ask me, like, oh, what are you using the computer for? Right? If they don't even ask that question, then I'm going to be like, okay. And if they're not asking other questions beyond that as to, like if you go to get Best Buy and you walk in the door and someone says, hey, I need a computer, what would you recommend? If they don't ask, the first question is not, what are you going to use it for? And they start telling you and trying to sell you something else, I wouldn't listen to them. In fact, I don't. If I go in there and they start telling me stuff before they even ask me what I'm actually looking for or what I need it for, how are they making an educated guess? They're making an educated guess, but they don't know what I need it for. What if I need it to do AutoCAD? Or what if I need to use it for an application that only runs on Windows? And what if they tell me, oh, you need to get an Apple Mac? Well, but then my application doesn't run. You know what I mean? So it's those types of things as a professional, because I get asked all the time, which one's better, Microsoft or Apple? So it depends. Depends upon the use case. So tell me what your use case is, what do you need it for, and then I'll tell you which one would be the most recommended for you. I'll give you the pluses and minuses of picking either one of them. Right?
Well, and that's part of being a professionalism, right? That's part of being a professional is you present the product or products with both the pluses and the minuses for each of them, right? And you present multiple choices. So, like you said, if somebody comes to you and says, what's the best PC for me, right? Computer, whatever, laptop. Well, here's your pick, right? You can have this one, this one, this one, or this one. And it doesn't matter what the OS is. I'm just giving like four different examples. And you would give the pros and cons for each one. So the person, they can look at all four of the recommendations, and then they can make a decision based on what their specific needs are to say, from what I've told the person, he gave me these four options. This is the best one that I feel that I'm going to get the best use out of. So that's the one I'm going to pick. But you've given him the information to make that decision. That's part of being a professional.
Right. And not letting your bias get in the way of what the business needs. And I think that's an important part of it, because you may have your own personal preference. And if you have a personal preference, say, well, I prefer this, and this is why I prefer that. You're perfectly fine to say that. But don't say, oh, this is the absolute best thing, you need this. And that's the thing that gets me. That really, I hear it all the time. But anyways. So there was a couple quotes that I wanted about professionalism. I'm not going to be doing more quotes other than this, but I thought they were kind of funny. Because Socrates says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is a habit. So just keep on doing the right thing, right? And Dr. Martin Luther King always had that great one, hey, if you're going to be a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper in the world, so that when you're done with it, everybody's going to say, that was the best darn street sweeper I've ever met. And then in career warfare, David says, work hard, being polite, dressing neatly are minimum daily requirements for any professional career. And I think that's a huge, important part. It's the minimum. And I think some people think it's optional. And now some people are going to think, oh, what are they going to say about, dress? Well, When we get there, we'll talk about it. But let's talk about communication. What do you guys think about communication? How could they be a professional in their ways of communication, whether it's email, text, phone calls, video conferencing, whatever? What do you guys got?
Well, I think text messaging has really skewed with written communication, and it's bled into what I see a lot with emails, even Skype conversations, where I see a lot of people that have adopted their own shorthand.
Yep.
And it makes it very challenging. And in all reality, I think it looks very unprofessional, where people get in such a habit of being shortcutters that becomes normal to them. So I always ask anybody that I'm working with to try to exercise at least decent grammar, spelling, try to structure something. If you're going to send an email out, put it together so it looks like it's an actual message, not shorthand that you're going to text to somebody on your 9-key telephone.
I agree. I've seen that texting has increased a lot lately, and in fact, being in education, students' preferred method for contacting me now is text. Like, they don't even send me emails anymore. No one ever calls. They all want to text, which I'm fine with. That's fine. I'll respond that way. But it's interesting just where I'm more likely to send an email, right? If I want to talk to somebody or do anything, my preferred communication method is email, if it's business related or something like that. And I mean, every class will tell you about business communications, but people that have even taken that class, as soon as they get out, they're writing an email to a client and they write it like they're writing to their friends.
That's the big distinction, right? Is the intended target. So if you're talking about whether you're a consultant or whether you're working for a company, who's the intended recipient of the message? You have to write according to that structure. And like you said, John, texting has kind of infiltrated a lot of business communications. And I mean, I've seen it as well. I mean, I've been on the recipient end where people have sent me email that I swear they just copied it off of the text and just sent me what could have been a text, right? But again, I think a bigger picture is you have to have good writing skills, good oral communication skills, written skills. I personally don't like texting from a business standpoint. It's fine if you're texting another person within the organization for like a quick response to a question or something like that. But if it's something that you're going to send out to a group within the organization or to clients, strictly email.
Now, I've used texting to clients in very rare circumstances. One, only if they've given me their cell phone number. And second, like if I'm on my way to a meeting and I'm stuck in traffic, I may send them a text saying that I am on my way, I'm in traffic, and I just do voice to text so it's not being truncated. I don't have to worry about, the spelling and all that kind of stuff. Well, I take that back. Sometimes Google doesn't know what I'm saying, even though I try to change it, train it 1,000 times, it still gets the wrong thing. And it comes out to be a hilarious text, but that's great for your friends. They'll get a laugh out of it, but for clients, double check before you hit the send button or you tell it to send, because sometimes it does it. And I think part of communication too, when you're writing an email, you got to know who your audience is. And I think that's what Rob was getting on, but I would take it a step further. When I create reports on an audit that I've done or an assessment that I've done, we typically have at least two different reports. We have an executive report, which is a high-level overview, which is typically a page to 2 pages. We try not to go beyond that. And then a technical report, which is generally for the staff that are running it, line by line. This is all the stuff that you need to do, and this is what we recommend for this. And that's where all the technical jargon is. The executive report does not have the technical jargon in it. I look at it this way. When I send an email, who am I sending the email to? I need to make sure that when I send it to an executive or a manager, that I'm short, to the point, start off the email with why I'm emailing them and why they care. I'm replying back to your email. I'm getting back to you about this, whatever it is, and then go into it very succinctly. It should not be 50 paragraphs long. If you're writing a 50-paragraph letter to an executive, they're not going to read it. Right? They're not the intended audience. I mean, I went to this one class and they said, hey, look, if you're talking to executives, you need to use primary colors. If something's bad, put it in red. If something's good, put it in green. And he said, treat them like they're kindergarten students. Keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Don't get into a lot of detail. Just give them overviews. And then, like we talked about earlier, what is it? What is the business talk about it? Don't use any of the technical jargon. Don't say the DHCP server went down. They're not going to want to hear that. Say one of our critical infrastructure. Well, I don't even know if you want to use the word infrastructure. One of the critical components of our system had a malfunction. Something along those lines, rather than say, hey, the DHCP server had a burp or whatever it is. They're not going to get it. But if you're writing to the system admins who are taking care of it, then yes, you use the technical jargon and you give them all the good stuff. So knowing your audience in communication is part of it. Second part of it, I think, when you're talking about inside and out versus outside of your organization. If it's inside your organization, you could probably get away with a little bit of shorthand, but remember, some of these people may be your boss one day. They also may be ones deciding whether or not you get a promotion. They may be the ones that somebody asks, say, hey, how good does Rob work? Oh, yeah. Well, he's really good, but, he always sends me these off-color jokes and stuff in email. That kind of stuff. That may reflect poorly on you. So when you're even in internal networks, internal organizations, you may want to be careful about what you're doing. And I want to say that this covers all spectrums, whether you're Skyping, texting, on a video conference, whatever it is. And by the way, if you're in a video conference, don't pick your nose. I was teaching a class once online, and we were video conferencing, and I had video, and a couple of the other students had video, and one of them was picking their nose for almost the entire time that I was talking. It was very distracting. And I'm like, do you not know that your camera is on? It's kind of weird. And then presentation skills are reporting. One thing about communication, we'll talk about listing next, but one thing about communication is if you have something outstanding with a customer, be proactive about communicating to them. Don't make them contact you before you respond. So if there's a project going on and there's a delay, make sure you communicate it to those people, the stakeholders. I would call them the stakeholders, whether they're internal stakeholders or client stakeholders external to your organization. Just give them a heads up. This is what the situation is at this point in time. You don't need to give a lot of detail, just keeping them informed. They appreciate that. The worst thing that a manager wants to do is, I have to go in and check out with this guy every day on what the status of this is, and he never reports anything to me. That frustrates them, and when it comes time for promotion, they're going to think twice about it. They want somebody, one, that could be a self-starter, and two, being a self-starter means that you're going to be proactive and communicate information out to them that you think they need. And I think if you're going to be a good system admin or good network admin or a good developer, you should anticipate the information that they may need and then give them that information. That's going to be like a career enhancement plus, because
Right.
If you go to somebody and say, hey, I noticed that you were doing this in Word. Did you know that you could use the citation manager to actually handle all your footnotes? Let me show you how you can do that. It'll make your job a lot easier. That's going above and beyond. And maybe that's not really in communication. That's more maybe customer service. But it's being proactive and just going out there and saying, hey, I didn't know if you needed to know this, but I'm just letting you know and I'm keeping you informed. That's all you have to do. And if you're working on a project and you're reporting to somebody, if they have to pester you all the time, take a clue. If every other day they're asking you what the status is, then maybe you should preempt that, right? and just say, hey, just wanted to give you another update. There's nothing to update at this point in time. I'm still waiting on X, whatever it is. But those are the types of things. So communication, part of it is listening. And active listening means that when you listen to somebody else, you acknowledge them. You acknowledge that you understand what they've said. So that may mean that you're repeating it back. You might say something like, let me get this straight. You're saying da 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 da. And then just put it in your own words. And then give them a chance to say, yes, that's what I mean. Especially if you're dealing with difficult people or you're dealing with a touchy subject or anything like that, recommend that you use this active listening technique. Before you criticize anything that they have to say, start off by saying, let me see if I understand what you're saying. You're saying that, and try not to say it in a condescending tone either. Tone is very important. Just say, ask with an inquisitive tone. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that you want us to do X, Y, and Z? And then they're going to say yes. Okay. I'm thinking about that now, and I'm wondering, did you think of X? Rather than saying, no, you're stupid, you should do this, or I don't think we should do that. Right? That's not the appropriate response. If they can't even finish their sentence before you jump in and you're telling them no, why you think what they're doing is wrong or what their suggestion is wrong, you're not listening to what they're saying. I have this all the time. I have a staff member that does this all the time, just jumps in, well, we're not going to do this. And then I have to stop them and say, okay, I want you to think about this. And then I have to build it out for them. And they're like, oh, I didn't know what you were talking about. Well, it would help in situations like that, if he was doing active listening, he would come to me and he'd say, let me see if I understand what you're saying, before he then tried to come up with a comment. What he does is, before I'm even finished with the sentence, comes up with why I'm wrong or why that won't work. And it's funny because I'm tell this person, hey, go and look this up, and then they come back and they're like, yeah, I just found that out. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I said. Anyways, so active listening is really important to that. And people want to know that you understand them too, especially if you're doing customer service. If a customer has a problem, realize that if they're upset and you think, wow, this person's way overreacting, you don't know what else is going on in their life. I mean, they may have just went through a divorce, their mother may have just died. You don't know what's going on in their life. So if they come in and they're really upset because you put lettuce in a taco, I'm talking about food service, but let's say whatever you did wrong. Don't get upset at the fact that they're upset. Say, I understand. Don't say I understand. Something that'll piss them off too. just say, if I understand correctly, you ordered it without lettuce and we put lettuce in. Is that correct? They say yes, then take care of it. Right? That's customer service. So don't tell the person not to be yelling at you and all that kind of stuff either, because that's not going to go over well either. So acknowledge them and don't be distracted. Don't sit on your phone texting when you're having a conversation with somebody. And we're all bad about this because we're all like, oh, I'm going to check my Facebook really quick, or I'm going to check this really quick, or, we're all bad about it. And a lot of us sometimes think, well, I'm paying attention to what he's saying, but I also need to check my email or something along those lines. And I do this from time to time, and I'm rude about it, and I know I need to stop. But I think there was an article or something about people being addicted to their phones. Like literally, if you take them away from them, they will actually be physically sick. But don't be distracted. Pay attention to what they're saying. And it's really hard if you're in a meeting and the meeting is boring and you have to be engaged. Trust me, I know. We call them meetings from hell. And somebody wants to go off on a tangent or something like that. If it's really bad, you can always say, I want to respect everybody's time here. Can we make sure that we keep it on topic? You can put something out there like that kind of help with a meeting, keeping it going, so that you're not going to get bored of the meeting and start doing other things you shouldn't be doing. You guys have anything to add about listening?
I think you pretty much covered all the bases on active listening. I mean, it's a key skill that you have to practice at. Because I know, like you said, a lot of people I've dealt with in the past, they'll listen to you, and as you are approaching the description or whatever the problem is, they'll jump in without letting you finish the conversation or at least the sentence that you were working on, right? And that, again, is something that's frustrating on the person who's talking at the time. But it also makes them, there's a couple of things, right? One, they don't feel like the other person has any respect for them because
True.
They're not letting them finish their train of thought, right? They're getting cut off. And two, and I've seen this more times than not, the person who jumps in ultimately ends up sounding like they have absolutely no idea what's going on, and they end up sticking their foot in their mouth because they'll say their spiel, the person who was originally talking will let them finish, and then they will continue on with what they were saying and provide, what the resolution was or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, like I said, the person who jumps in there ends up going, oh, well, I thought you meant this. I guess I didn't understand what you were talking about.
What is that? I forgot the name of that. What's the saying? It said something like, open your mouth and dispel all doubt.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And that is frustrating. And I think people want to know that they're heard. Whatever their issue is, especially customer service side of things, if someone's upset, they just want to understand that that they were heard, that you understand why they're upset. That's the biggest thing with customer service. If you let them know that you know why they're upset, then that usually calms them down. And there's other ways to calm people down, but presentation skills. Rob, you had a couple points on this one.
Yeah, this is a key one for me because I've seen this so many times. And you've already kind of touched base on it with 2 previous core areas. And that number 1 is know your intended audience. If you are giving a report to the executive branch, you don't tell them, like you said, our DHCP problem was blah, 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 right? They're going to look at you and go, I really don't care. I don't even know what a DHCP server is, right? I'm not sure what got worked on it, but is it working? What was the impact to the business? Is that why we couldn't create, these widgets for the last hour or whatever? They want a report that's at their level. So that's number 1, right? Know the intended target of your audience. Number 2, you have to be able to read the feedback from your audience, right? Because sometimes you might go down and add some technical terms, and if you don't have the ability to interpret the reactions, if you're giving a technical term and you're not defining it anywhere, they're going to look at you and go, what does that term mean, right? Is it something that is only on the infrastructure side or the technology side, and what is it on the business side? What's the impact of that, whatever jargon you just mentioned, related to the business side? Another key thing is when you're dealing with businesses, and it doesn't matter which industry you are in, whether you work for a company or you're a consulting company or you end up working for a consulting company, know the business in which you are in. And what I mean by that is if you're in the banking industry, you should know how a bank functions. You should know what ledgers are, not to the degree that you can take the place of a teller, for example, but you're there to understand the core of the business because the technology is there to support the core function of the business. And if you don't understand that core function of the business, how are you going to understand the technology that's going to support them?
Right. There has to be an alignment with technology. Technology supports the business function. How can you support the business function if you don't know what the business function is?
Right.
You're absolutely right.
And like I said, it does not matter if it's, I work as a consultant for a consulting company, and, today I might go out to a bank because they have a problem with, a printer that's not functioning correctly, or, tomorrow I may be sent off to an accounting firm. Friday I may get sent off to a car dealership. Well, you should have at least some basic understanding of those particular industries and their functions, right? What's their business driver? So when you get there and you find what the problem is, you can present the solution to them and say, look, here's the solution. This is the impact into your business right now. This is what's happening. This is, the estimated cost to repair it, and it's going to return you back to doing your primary function of whatever it is.
Yeah, Ron had sent in some talking points for this, and he said, talk about how technology removes costs or reduces time for the business process. And he said, never talk about the technology unless asked a specific question. In other words, always focus in on what the business process is. And then he also said, also propose and do what's best for the business, even if it's not necessarily best for IT, which I agree with. Even if it's difficult for IT to do, but it's going to make everybody else's job easier than IT does it. You know what I mean?
I will give you this example, right? My wife for the longest time had her own business. She sold high-speed data circuits and phone systems, right? Both PBXs and voice over IP systems. And she had a client call up and, gave her the kind of like the specs of what they were looking for in terms of, data connectivity and how many voice circuits they needed and all that kind of stuff. And my wife, goes through her brokerage software and gets the quote and the pricing. And ultimately she comes back to the client and says, look, he says, you gave us a price point that you were looking for. We're literally double that. We can't do anything within the margins that you're looking for. Really sorry. You're going to have to, we can't do anything for you. Just to let you know, pretty much everybody that you're going to talk to is going to be in the same area that we are, because there's no circuits that feed to your location right now. So you're going to have to incur a cost to bring that cable out to your facility. And most of the other organizations, they're going to want that up front, and they're going to want a bigger pipe than what you could ever imagine, because now they're going to feed it out to your location with the expectation that other businesses are going to pop up and they're going to branch off of that. So you're going to end up paying for them to bring this connection out to you. The person at the other end, they're like, well, that's not really kind of what we're looking for, but we really appreciate the fact that you were honest with us and tell us, what was going on. But 2 years later, they came back to her and they said, hey, you know what? We're opening up another location over here. Can you were really honest with us and told us what we need to look out for and what to be aware of. We're going to give you this business over here. So it doesn't matter what the price point is. If it's a fair price point, it's yours. That's kind of the nurturing aspect of that business side, understanding the business aspect and letting them know sometimes that there's no solution, right? You can't provide them a solution. Sometimes that is the case.
Well, part of it is managing their expectations. But that's
sure.
But that's a little bit under the customer service side of things. But that is a really good point, which I think we'll hit again. Under the presentation skills, you talked about reading your audience, which is something as trainers that we're all that's one of the things we cover in taking a trainer class on how to be a trainer. And it's very difficult when you don't have an audience and there's nobody there looking and you can't see their face. You can't see if they are puzzled or perplexed or, we all do it, right? Because we do training. We're in front of people. I look around at my students, and if I see somebody, they're all distracted, nobody's paying attention, then I'm boring. So I need to liven it up. If I look around and everybody looks like they're like, I don't know what this guy's saying. So reading body language is a part of it. If people look agitated, then you need to tone it back or something. You have to read the room. You have to read the audience, right?
Yep.
Respect them. Part of presentation skills is beginning on time and ending on time. If you said you're going to have a conversation from 2 to 4, then you start promptly at 2 and you end promptly at 4. And you just say at 4 o'clock, say, I want to respect everybody's time. I understand that this is a really good conversation we're having. If we want to continue talking about it, we can, but I did promise you that you'd be out of here at 4, so if people need to leave, I understand you have other commitments. That's just having common courtesy or respect for them because they have it. I think Stephen Covey, he said something about what are your values? Do you value other people's time? Well, if you do value other people's time, then you should actually start the meeting on time and end on time. If you don't value your time, then you're going to show up late and do those other things. If you're doing a presentation, especially for like executives and stuff like that, you need to be on time, there, present, prompt, and be ready for any of their questions. So you got to really know your stuff. And don't read the slides.
That's a big one. Don't read slides.
Yeah, you had said some stuff on Rob about, they're just talking points.
They are. They're meant for triggers for what you are actually going to talk about, right? They should be high-level overviews of the topic at hand, right? So usually your slide is going to be a grouping of some, 4 or 5 key topics, and here's what those key topics are, and now I'm going to go into a more in-depth discussion on each of those core topics. But, nobody wants you to read their slides because people can read, right? You can read the slides ourselves, and if you're just going to sit there and read the slides, then we really don't need the meeting. All you had to do is send us the slides, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, just send me a memo then.
Right, exactly.
Well, that's the thing too, is maybe a presentation isn't the appropriate way. You have to kind of figure out what the best way to get the information, because you're communicating. Presentation is a way of communicating. What's the best way to reach your audience, whoever it is? Sometimes a presentation is the best way. One of the reasons why a presentation may be the best way is you can focus on different learning styles. Some people are visual learners, some are audible learners, and so the visual learners, if you have a chart or a graph or something that you can point at, that may tell them a lot more than a bunch of text on a slide. And you think about it, if you have paragraphs, that is not appropriate for a slide. And I try to tell people this all the time, and people just want to keep on putting in paragraphs into slides. It's terrible. You should not do it. It's not respectful to the audience. One, if it's too small, they can't read it.
Right.
And it just frustrates them. And then they say, can I have a printout of this so I can read it? You just have the bullet points, and then they can take notes. You need to have it at a high level or visual to meet the visual learners. For the ones that want to read, give them something to read. Give them a handout, give them a book.
Sure. I can't remember where I saw the caption, but it was like, PowerPoint for gurus or something like that. But basically the gist of it was a PowerPoint slide should have no more than like 6 bullet points.
Oops, this one blew it. This customer service one blew it.
This was their concept of like how to use PowerPoint and presentation skills effectively.
Right.
Right. And what they were talking about is once you start going past a certain number of bullet points, the slide becomes too busy, right? And it's hard for people to follow through unless you as the presenter are highlighting or you build animation into your slide where you hit the button and it crosses out or puts a checkbox next to the one that you just finished talking about so people can actually visually see where they're at. Because like you said, we have different learning styles, and some people may, from an audible cue, they can follow you, and others need something visually that says, oh, we're on this bullet point. Even though I just told you this is the title of the bullet point I'm going to talk about, they still need that visual indicators where we're sitting, right?
Right.
And the other one was to keep the bullet points short and sweet, so to speak, right? Like you said, don't have a bullet point that's a paragraph long because it's too distracting on a slide. And what ends up ultimately happening is the presenter and I've seen this, they'll read the slide, right? They'll have the slide projected up behind them, but they'll read it from the screen in front of them, literally word for word.
Right.
So if you have a very succinct title or whatever it is that you were talking about, right? Like this dependability. Well, now you can go off on what that actually means within the customer service scope, right? Or the integrity of your customer service. What does that really entail? That's what you as the presenter, what you're communicating effectively.
Right, and that's, I think you hit it right on the head. And I even like to do, sometimes when I do slides, is I just do a picture or a number, or a symbol. And then that is a cue for me what I need to talk about. But that symbol is typically something that will remind them of what we're talking about. Like for this slide right here, customer service. You notice that there's a person there, they're on the phone, they're happy. It looks like there's other people in the background that are also happy, and it looks like the customers are probably happy. You know what I mean? This is a part of what you want for customer service. And so I have my slide, I have a picture here that kind of represents that. Something that everybody will look at and instantly know. So talking about customer service, I think part of it is, one, always putting the customer first. I mean, Zappos got a big, huge name, and one of the reasons why they got bought was because they went to the extreme on customer service. They basically said, if a customer calls us for anything, we'll help them out if we can, right? So people would call and say, hey, I'm in New York and I'm looking for something to eat, and they call the help desk, and help desk would answer their question, although they were selling shoes. You know what I mean? But they got so many customers for life because of that. So always putting the customer first, I think, is one of the things. Empathizing with them, especially if they're upset, trying to find out why. Use your active listening skills. And manage their expectations is one of the things I think that's a skill that I think many people have a tendency to not be able to do themselves. In other words, so let's talk about this. Someone comes in, they give you their hard drive, and they say, look, my hard drive doesn't work. Don't go and say, I'll fix it for you. One, you don't know what the problem is. So manage their expectations. Go back to them and say, I don't know what the problem is. There's several different problems. I'm going to have to test it to find out which one of those problems it is. Two of those problems are not going to be recoverable. One of them I can recover, but it's going to be very expensive. And another one, I could probably get it done fairly cheaply. So I'm just letting you know up front what it is. You're managing their expectations. Don't try to be a people pleaser and tell them, oh, I'll solve the problem for you. One, you're not being professional because now you're kind of disingenuous. And right. Two, you want to manage their expectations. You don't want them to think, oh, I'm going to recover your stuff. The tendency that we have, somebody calls in and they're like, oh my God, all my pictures are on there and I'm going to lose all my grandma's stuff, and say, look, I want to do everything I can to get it off for you, right? But I don't know that it's even possible. I have to look at it. Once I look at it, I'll let you know. And if you're not going to look at it right away, then tell them, I've got some other customers in the cube in front of you, so I will get to this by Friday. And then on Friday, if you told them that you were going to get to it by Friday, they're expecting some kind of communication from you on Friday about the status. So you would follow back up with them and say, look, I wasn't able to get to it like I thought I was going to. It'll be Monday now, at least telling that. Don't let them contact you. Again, be proactive. Don't let them contact you on Friday afternoon saying, hey, I thought you were going to get to this by Friday. And then you go, oh, yeah, I'm not going to get to it till Monday. No, you want to be proactive in managing their expectations and communicating with them. And then if you find out something, say, I tested everything. This is what the problem is. It's not recoverable, or it is recoverable, but we have to send it out, or whatever the issue is. Just let them know what the issue is. And if there's options, oh, you need to upgrade this or you need to do that, then come back to them and say, look, you need to upgrade this, but here's the situation. And then give them what the options are. Because sometimes it's like someone comes in, their computer's really slow, and they don't have enough RAM in it, and they have a 10-year-old computer. Sure, I could say go buy some RAM and fill it up, and it would probably run for a little bit longer, but I would be not doing a good job because it may be better off idea in money better spent to buy a new computer. Computers aren't that expensive these days, so you can get a fairly decent one for a fairly cheap price. Yes, the RAM would be cheaper, but you're also still running old hardware. And if it's old hardware, it may have an old operating system, which may put them at risk, cyber-wise, security. So you want to make sure that you're not making recommendations that are for clients that, give them the options. Tell them what the options are. Hey, I can replace the RAM in this. It's going to only cost this much, but you're really running an old operating system and old hardware. A new system would cost you about this much. And you may lose business because of that, but they will like you for it. And as a matter of fact, here's a good example of that. My mechanic, I always call him my mechanic because I always go back to the same mechanic, because I've had a lot of bad mechanics in the past who were not honest with me, and they did other things. I went in there and I said, hey, I think my brakes need to be changed. I need oil change. I come back and he says, your brakes don't need to be changed. You've got 80% wear on them. I'm not sure why you think they need to be changed. And I said, oh, well, I just thought it was time to do it. And he said, no, these last this long. Most other mechanics would say, hey, I could charge him for that. They could say, hey, I'm going to tell him I'm changing it, not change it. That's really bad. Or I'll just go ahead and change it, and then I did what he said, but I get to mark it up and I get to charge the time. But this mechanic didn't. He was completely honest with me. He says, no, you don't need that. So, I mean, because of that, I go back to him every time. But that gets back up to the integrity part, right? He had integrity. He didn't try to do something that was beneficial to him and not to me. He tried to do what was beneficial, putting me first. Tact is just always being polite. Be tactful. If the customer needs to know something, there's a tactful way to say it. You don't have to be rude. You should always be polite. And in fact, the second that you're rude, you've lost. So you want to make sure that you never let them, no matter what the customer says to you, whether they're yelling at you or not, you never want to let them push you too far to the point where you yell back or you say something inappropriate, because it's your job that's going to be on the line. And I think responsibility, the reason why I put responsibility there is, if a customer calls you and they're having a problem, take responsibility for it until it is fixed, until it is done. So and you'll notice if you call into tech support for a lot of these companies, I know Microsoft does it, I know others do, they will ask you when they're done with the phone, oh, I just helped you fix this problem. Is there anything else I can help you with? And you say no. They say, okay, I'm going to close the ticket out. Is that okay? Right? So they want to make sure that they've confirmed with you, hey, I've asked you if there's anything else I want to do. I've resolved what you called in for. I've asked you if there was anything else in case I missed something. And now that I'm done, I'm going to ask you permission to say, can I close this ticket out? Right? So they're going through, they're taking responsibility for the whole thing to make sure that they've solved whatever your problem is. And once that's done, then their responsibility is done. Until the client has told you that they are happy and they are done, sometimes that's them signing off on something, then you're responsible to make sure it's done up until that point. That's just good customer service. And that means that you're going to be responsible for stuff, whatever it is, whatever the client needs. I had a story about that. Oh, I had a client. They called me up one day and they said, hey, you talked about Office 365. We were interested in that. How long does it take you to set up? I said, well, I can set it up in a couple hours. I mean, it doesn't take very long to set it up. I said, but if you have email server now, we got to migrate everything over, and that gets a little complicated, but we can work it out. And they said, okay, call me back a week later. And they said, hey, when do you have time this week? Could you come out and migrate us to Office 365? And I said, sure. What's the situation? Well, for the last week, our Exchange server's been down, and because we weren't doing backups, they weren't doing system state backups with Active Directory. And because of that, they couldn't recover Active Directory. And because they couldn't recover Active Directory, even if they brought the Exchange server up, nothing's going to work because there's no authentication. So, and they couldn't fix it, and they've been trying to fix it for a week. Their IT guy had been going crazy, working every night trying to get this server back up. And I ended up just, so she told me that, and it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I said, well, this is what I can do. I can come out there, I can set up Office 365 for you. We'll get email running again, because we'll just provision new accounts. Then once it's up and running, you can take your Outlook clients, set up the new email account, because it's going to be a new profile, and then we'll copy everything over from one to the other. And it should take, they had 50 users or something like that. So I said it should take less than a day to get all that done. But we can have the email provisioned, and you can start sending and receiving email almost immediately. Getting all the historical emails and mailboxes all over is going to take some time, but you're in a dire situation. So I said, here's an engagement letter. I'll send it to you, sign it, send it back, and then I'll get out there. She signed it, sent it back, and I said, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. All right, I'm on my way. And she's like, oh, you're on your way? And I'm like, well, you don't have email service, and you haven't had it for a week. I'm assuming that this is a mission critical server, and so I'm on my way. And she's like, okay, yeah, we're going to be working here all night anyways because we can't do anything until it's done. And I'm like, well, I'm on my way. And they were expecting me to say, well, I'm busy and I can't go out until Friday or something like that. I'm like, no, it's a priority for you. It's a priority for me. I get out there. I was there until midnight. By the way, I had Office 365 set up in less than an hour. That wasn't the hard part. Helping them to try and get, log in, set up a new profile for Outlook, copy everything over from a PST, all that kind of stuff. That was the hard part. But after I showed them a couple times how to do it, then they were on their own. And then they took care of it. A day later, their staff had it all done. That client was so ecstatic about my service because I went above and beyond what they were expecting that they've told other now clients of mine about the service, and now they come to me to do Office 365 to do the migrations, just because I put the customer first. So that that's a good thing for your career, right?
Yep.
Dealing with difficult people. This is always a fun one. I think, what was the thing? For the last slide, I forgot, on dependability. Ron sent in, he said, always deliver on your commitments. If something unexpected happens, inform your contact immediately. Don't make them come looking for you. Same type of thing I said, but always deliver on your commitments and make sure they're realistic time constraints. It's far better to deliver something early than late, right? If they're going to say, hey, I want this by this date, or they say, when can you have it done by, and you say Friday the 20th or something like that, get it done a week before that. Don't wait until the Friday the 20th to get it in if you can get it done. But when you're dealing with difficult people, Ron had set 3 points, and I figured I'd just say those, and then you guys can jump in and say anything you want. Always seek to understand the underlying issue, what caused, and work at that issue. If time is really tight, focus on meeting the deliverable, then go back and troubleshoot afterwards, whatever the issue was. And no matter what happens, maintain a professional demeanor. It's always okay you can always vent with a coworker in a closed room, but never in front of a client. Don't vent in front of them. I've read all three of these books in the past in dealing with difficult people, and they're all very similar, but they come at it from a different point of view, and I thought it was really interesting. They got blog posts on 2 of them, but all of them you're going to have coworkers, you're going to have clients, you're going to have bosses or people that report to you that are going to be difficult to deal with. And it doesn't matter what career you're in. And the only person that I can think of, and they don't even have jobs anymore, that's a lighthouse operator. You don't have to talk to anybody at all. That's the only time you don't have to deal with difficult people. Otherwise, you're going to deal with people somewhere along the line, and somebody's going to be difficult. And again, you're not going to know why they're difficult. You just have to kind of go with it and kind of redirect them. Take their energy, their negative energy, and then redirect it in a positive way. And each one of these books kind of talks about it in a different way. The talking to crazy is not talking about somebody who's clinically crazy. It's talking about talking to someone who's being what's the right word for it? Unrealistic.
Yes.
So how to talk to those people and how to take and redirect them. The verbal judo one's kind of interesting because the whole idea about judo is, take their energy and use it against them, but then not necessarily to hurt them, but to just prevent them or stop them. And the guy is the guy that wrote it originally, and there's an updated version of it that they added some more stuff onto it. He was a cop, and he learned it from being a cop. And he has a lot of really good stories in there that explains how, just even being a cop, and so much so that a number of police departments require cops to take this training before they get out on the beat. And the funny thing was the police that were related to that started the whole riots, and was it Rodney King or something like that? The police that were involved in that were scheduled to take the training, but hadn't taken it yet. And then, but if they would have taken the training and they would have acted differently, so much hardship would have been avoided. Anyways, so good books to read, kind of give you an idea of how do you respond to it when someone's being unrealistic or we would colloquially say crazy, because we're not professional psychologists. Have you ever had to deal with a difficult person, either of you, where you just didn't know how to deal with it? I can say that I have.
I think we all have it to one degree or another, right, in our careers.
Well, it goes beyond careers. I mean, it goes at home, school,
Sure.
wherever. And I have to admit, I've not always been very good at this part of it, and that's why I read the books. Because you can't let things you can't let things get you mad. You can't, because people are going to say stuff, and you could get really upset about it, but it's not going to do any good. It's just going to cause more problems later on. Appearance. What about clothing, attire, bearing, hygiene, grooming, all those type of stuff? And my one point that I said earlier, right or wrong, people will judge you by the way you look, dress, and carry yourself.
I agree. Right? Keep your hair, tightly kept. Right? Don't look like a Ubangi. A couple of things that I can't remember if it was part of the email run it sent out or not, but again, know the foods that you and liquids that you've consumed. So if you've if you've had coffee and you're going to a meeting, have a breath mint or chew some sort of gum that will help clear out some bad breath if you had it.
Right.
Be mindful of that. Make sure your clothes are in good repair, that they're not ripped or torn or things like that. Again, it's just making yourself look professional when you're going to that type of an environment or setting, right?
Right. Here's my life hack for everybody. In my desk drawer, I have deodorant, toothpaste, toothbrush, an extra set of clothes and socks. And at my office, I don't have it currently there, but I usually keep a sports jacket there in case I went to work and I didn't have to wear a sports jacket, but I'm going to go out to a client that I can just throw it on and go. So those are the types of things that you just keep the extra stuff there because you may need it. You never know. And I always have gum in my car, and just in case I go out to lunch or something like that, I just throw a piece of gum in there before I start walking around in front of people with bad breath. Hygiene's a big one. I don't want to say especially for IT folks because that's a generalization. But I've run into a lot of people who I'm like, when was the last time you took a shower? I mean, seriously, you come to work and you smell that bad? There's a problem, right? Now, again, you don't know what the person's problem is. They may have depression. They may have some other type of thing, but it makes it very difficult if you're in an office and you're in a cubicle and the cube mate that's with you never takes a shower. It can make it really bad. And the other thing you have to be considerate of is the fact that they may come from another culture. And in that culture, maybe that's okay. But in this culture, it's not. So I don't know how you tread on that one. But definitely part of it, too, some people may be allergic to perfumes. So if you do use perfume, you should not come across where people walk right into you and they're like, oh my God, this guy's like all full of perfume. You should wear it very, very lightly. Don't drench yourself in it. And most people will say that you should get a haircut once a month or something along those lines. I have to do it every 2 weeks, but I keep my hair fairly short. It's because I grew up as a Marine, I guess. And by the way, I like your new haircut, Rob.
No, thank you.
Nice and short like mine. So hygiene, keep yourself, grooming, keep that up to date. Clothing, this is an interesting one because everybody says, well, you're going to say wear a suit to work. No, you have to know where you work. I have a friend who works at a bank, and he works in the data center in the bank. He works in a data center. He's in the room that in fact, he has earmuffs because he's in a room that's noisy with fans and all that stuff. And that's typically cold because he's in there and it's, blowing cold air because he's in the server room. And he's required to wear a shirt and tie, even though nobody in the world's going to see him because he goes into his dark little room and he stays in there all day and then leaves. But he's required because that's the business code because he works for a bank. If you're in banking or finance, that's typically the minimum dress code is a shirt and a tie or a button-down shirt without a tie, and maybe on Fridays they may let you go down to a golf shirt or something along those lines. But you have to know where you work. Also, if you're going to apply for a job at one of these places, you have to know how they dress, right?
Yep.
If you're going to apply a job and you don't know how they dress, dress in the middle or something like that, or do something you get away with, or go look people up that work at that business on LinkedIn and see if they have profile pictures and what they put in there. And by the way, a lot of people put not very professional profile pictures in their LinkedIn. You should never do that. We have a previous Trainers Underground that we did talking about LinkedIn and how to do your profile a long time ago. You go look that up because all the stuff's still valid. But you want to have go see what people dress like in that organization or that industry, and then try to make that. Look, if you go and work for Facebook, you could probably come to work in jeans and flip-flops, and they're not going to care because that's just the way Silicon Valley is. That's fine for Silicon Valley, but if you're someplace else, that's probably not going to be allowed. You have to know that, and you just have to kind of dress for the occasion. And like you said earlier, Rob, don't dress for the position you have. Dress for the position you want. And I have a hard time with that too sometimes because I'm a very utilitarian person. So
Yep.
I want to wear khakis and because I don't know what kind of action is going to happen today. But I definitely agree that all your clothing should also fit well. It should not be sagging, right? Put a belt on and make sure it's around your waist, not around your calves, right? Because people are going to judge you whether or not you think it. Nobody wants to see your dirty underwear. Anyway, so you want to make sure that your clothing does fit for the place you're working, and you want to make sure if you have hair and you have really long hair that you can have long hair. It just needs to be neat, combed, washed, those types of things. So your attire is going to be one of the things that's going to be kind of important for you. If you're going to see a client, then don't go in wearing a shirt with spaghetti stains all over it because you had it at lunch. This is my life hack. That's why you have another shirt available at the office in case something happens to the one that you're wearing. I don't know. I learned this when I was in the Marines. That's why I put pictures of Marines because look, they're all squared away. But they instilled that in us that you always have to be ready. So you always have more than one uniform. You always have more than that. If something happens to one of them, it doesn't matter. You can still show up and still be squared away and look like you're squared away. And bearing, I put this under appearance rather than talking about clothing and attire because bearing has to do with how you carry yourself. If you carry yourself with confidence, people are going to think that you're confident and they're going to treat you as if you are confident. And if you slouch, then they're going to treat you like you're lazy. It's just the way people are. They take up visual cues, not even in their mind, If they just look at you and you look like you're slouched in a chair, they're going to say this person doesn't care. Or they're going to read your body language, and you're sending them a message with how you carry yourself. And so you want to carry yourself with confidence, not with, I don't want to say like um, false sense of pride or anything like that, or you're better than everybody else. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying, like, you know what you're doing. Keep your head up high. You're a person. You deserve respect. Act like it. Don't be all slouchy and all that kind of stuff. And I pick Marines for it because they're really good examples of it. But if you the funny thing is, I talk about this in my class because in the A+ class, one of the things that we talk about is customer service and appearance, all this other kind of stuff, because that's part of the exam. They ask you questions on that. And I'm always telling students about, you want to be squared away. If you have clothing and it has a rip in it, don't use that as work clothing anymore, right? It should be retired. Holey jeans, that's not work attire. Maybe it is if you're not a professional, then you don't have to listen to any of our advice. But know that you're limiting your career. It's not my rules that I'm making up. I'm not trying to get you to follow the John, Don, and Rob way of doing things. It's just that people judge you these ways. I'm telling you what the unwritten rules are, and you follow them or don't follow them. Just understand that if you're wondering why you're not getting ahead in your career or you didn't get that job, maybe it's the way you dress, maybe it's the way you talk, maybe it's any of those types of things. Maybe it's the way you communicate. And focus in on those areas. Try to be, I always look at it this way, the old-fashioned gentleman, right? What's the name of the movie with, was it Million Ways to Die in the West or something like that? And Neil Patrick Harris was he always had the funny mustache, and he owned a mustachery or something like that where he did all it. But I look at him and he looks like the quintessential, he'd act like a gentleman, always dressed up, always looked like he was appropriate through most of the movie. And that's kind of the way that people look at back in the old days what a gentleman would look like. And this is kind of, or a lady would be expected to act in a certain way, talk in a certain way, dress in a certain way. And as a professional, that still exists. And I'll say it right now. That has no bearing on how smart you are or how capable you are of doing a job. That's two different things. The knowledge, skills, and abilities you have are separate from the way that you look, act, and communicate. But the way you look, act, and communicate can also limit your ability in your career to move forward. So you want the knowledge, skills, and abilities, the technical side of things, but then the soft skills, that's the other stuff that they wanted us to talk about. Or a lot of people are looking for people to have more soft skills. And everything that we said in here is really key, especially translating technology talk into business talk. That is super key. If there's one thing that you can learn out of all of this, that's probably the most important thing. I learned really the hard way a long time ago that I needed to do that. But luckily, I'm a quick learner. You guys have anything else? Or do we beat this horse to death?
Nope. I think we did a good job.
Yep, I think it's all good.
Well, that's good. Stay tuned for our next episode. I have no idea what we'll be talking about. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Trainers Underground. If you have any requests for future episodes, please go to our website, www.learnsecurity.org, and fill out the comment section. If you found this video informative, please like below. We would greatly appreciate that. If you would like to catch a future episode, just follow this channel or find it on our website, www.learnsecurity.org. If you have any comments about today's episode, please comment below. Again, thank you so much. And remember, stay safe and secure.